Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are undertaking a truly massive and I think an absolutely essential deep dive.
I agree.
We're taking a journey that spans millennia, from the earliest human settlements right up to the incredible complexities of modern Middle Eastern politics. We are diving deep into the history, the geography, and the intricate cultural identity of the Kurdish people.
This is a deep dive we've needed for a long time because the information out there about the Kurds is often, highly fragmented.
Or subject to just intense political spin.
Or simply overlooked in standard Western historical narratives. Our core source material today provides, I hope, the necessary remedy. It's a comprehensive scholarly work, Bir el-Kitaba, Kurtler, or A Book on the Kurds.
And that source material gives us immense scope. It offers this crucial foundational framework with detailed analysis across, everything. History, geography, demographics, religion.
And modern political life. It literally covers everything from the Paleolithic era around 10,000 BCE all the way through the post-Cold War contemporary era.
So what makes this source particularly valuable?
It's the academic rigor and its commitment to synthesizing information from diverse and, often conflicting regional archives.
So it lets us move beyond the headlines.
Exactly. It lets us understand the deep structure of Kurdish culture and political life.
Absolutely. So our mission here is clear: to synthesize that vast foundational knowledge for you. We want to extract the surprising nuggets about their ancient roots, explain the unique and challenging geographical constraints they face,
And detail the incredibly complex internal structures like clans and these unique faith traditions that really define Kurdish identity today.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the very ground they stand on. It's really the only place to begin because the land, it fundamentally dictates the history and the conflict.
When you look at the region historically known as Kurdistan, you are looking at one of the most geologically active and volatile places on the planet.
It's not static terrain.
No, not at all. It is a land constantly in motion. It sits right at the junction of three massive tectonic plates: the Eurasian, the African, and the Arabian.
So it's literally a collision zone. And that collision is ongoing, right? This isn't ancient history.
That's the key. This massive slow-motion crunch causes the Zagros Mountains, which form the backbone of the region, to rise continuously,
By how much?
often by a few centimeters every single year. It's a land that is perpetually being squeezed and elevated.
And this geological reality, it extends far beyond just, spectacular mountain ranges.
Oh, absolutely. Here is where the geography translates directly into immense geopolitical importance.
Okay.
That massive compression and the geological structure underlying the region, particularly where it extends down to the Arabian platform.
Right.
That is what created the conditions for the rich hydrocarbon reserves we associate with the Persian Gulf Basin.
So the mountains themselves are inextricably linked to the region's massive oil wealth. This compression created the structural traps that hold the oil.
Precisely. It makes areas like the Kirkuk Basin, which sits right at the foothills of the Zagros, an area of intense strategic and economic importance for every single surrounding power.
So the mountains are the physical and symbolic core of Kurdish life, but the land itself sits on enormous, globally critical wealth.
And we have to acknowledge the sheer physical scale of this mountain core. It dictates identity, climate, and survival.
We're talking about defining high peaks and volcanic areas that shape the entire landscape.
Things like Nemrut Dağ and the colossal Mount Ararat, or Büyük Avra, which sits right at the intersection of several national borders today. These mountains have always served as both a sanctuary and a natural fortress.
Let's talk about water, because in the Middle East, water is often more vital than oil.
Always.
The climate varies drastically with elevation, obviously leading to arid or semi-arid lands in some lower valley areas.
But the Central Highlands are surprisingly water-rich. They act as a massive natural reservoir for the entire region.
How much water are we talking about?
Well, these Central Highlands receive abundant precipitation, sometimes recording 120 to 200 cubic centimeters annually. That is a significant intake.
And that guarantees a consistent water supply, even through dry summers.
It does. However, the source reminds us it's a land of extremes. About 19% of the area, primarily in the higher Anatolian regions of northern Kurdistan, experiences very cold annual average temperatures.
How cold?
Often hovering between freezing point and about 5 degrees Celsius or 40 Fahrenheit. These high, cold regions sustain permanent glaciers, which, further ensures water stability.
What's truly fascinating is that this region functions as the hydrological heart of the entire Middle East.
That's a perfect way to put it.
The critical river systems, the mighty Tigris, the Euphrates or Farad, the Zap, the Kura, and the Aras rivers, they all originate in this mountainous core.
And those rivers are literally the lifeblood for huge swaths of downstream countries like Iraq and Syria.
Which leads directly to modern environmental concerns.
Yes, which are cited heavily in the source material. Contemporary development, particularly large-scale dam and reservoir construction, poses a critical threat.
It's not just about the natural erosion from spring rains.
Well, that's part of it. But the sources point out that these existing dams are filling up at an alarming rate with topsoil.
So they are silting up, which drastically reduces their capacity and their lifespan.
Exactly. This silting is destroying the region's long-term hydraulic potential, and at the same time, it's robbing the downstream agricultural lands of fertile sediment.
So it threatens the future fertility of the land itself.
It does. It raises very serious questions about the long-term sustainability of the area's water resources and its agriculture.
Okay, so moving from this dramatic physical landscape to the human history, the archaeological record suggests this is one of the oldest continually settled areas on Earth.
Without a doubt.
When we talk about Paleolithic sites, we are talking about places like Shanidar Cave in the Zagros Mountains of Iraqi Kurdistan.
And Shanidar is legendary in human history, not just in archaeology. It's where the remains of Neanderthals were discovered.
And those findings fuel that famous, if still debated, theory of the first flower people.
Yes, the idea of complex funerary rituals, the burial of the dead with flowers happening as far back as 50,000 years ago.
Which demonstrates a deep cultural history, a sensitivity that is just undeniably ancient.
And this ancient history shows remarkable continuity. If we look at the subsequent Neolithic period, the evidence of the Halaf culture, which thrived between about 6,000 and 5,400 BCE, is widespread.
And the Halaf culture is significant. Why?
Because it defines the region's early technological prowess. It's recognized by its distinct, highly sophisticated painted pottery traditions and its widespread influence across regions we now associate with Kurdish settlement.
So it links this geography to some of the earliest technological and artistic developments in the Fertile Crescent.
That's right.
Now, we have to address the intense debate over origins, a debate that is, I think it's fair to say, rarely purely academic and often deeply political.
Always political.
Classical texts, like those written by Polybius and Diodorus, they refer to a mountain group called the Kurti.
And even with this early reference, there is an ongoing and often furious debate about whether we can definitively link these ancient groups to the modern Kurds.
For scholars, the line of connection is complex.
Of course. It's because of linguistic and cultural shifts over millennia.
But the source material makes it really clear that this academic difficulty is aggressively exploited today by surrounding states.
Precisely. The core of the political struggle isn't just about territory, it's an information war about identity.
How so?
The sources highlight a concerted contemporary political strategy across neighboring states, Turkey, Syria, Iraq, Iran, Azerbaijan, and Turkmenistan, to actively deny Kurdish ethnic originality.
And they do this by attempting to erase or relabel their history.
Yes. And what specific labels are used to facilitate this denial? They're called Mountain Turks, Umayyad Arabs, or other, politically convenient terms.
So this is not a matter of benign historical revisionism.
No, it is a direct political act intended to suppress national identity claims and restrict genuine scholarly research into Kurdish origins. The goal is to limit the basis for political autonomy or self-determination.
It's a powerful paradox that the source highlights. This denial is underway at the national level, yet Kurdish art and handicrafts, the kilims, the weaving, the distinctive metalwork, they continue to be produced and even thrive.
That's the striking tragedy. While the culture persists physically and artistically, cultural institutions and national museums in these states often systematically ignore or overlook these contributions when they define the official national history.
So it is, in effect, a deliberate institutionalized erasure of a vibrant culture that is thriving right in plain sight.
Exactly.
Moving out of deep prehistory, the historical influence of groups that occupied or originated in Kurdistan becomes much clearer.
Right, starting with significant political entities like the Mitanni Empire, which flourished between about 1500 and 1200 BCE.
And the Mitanni Empire is crucial because their political structure reveals this early migration and cultural layering.
It does. The populace primarily spoke Hurrian, which is a native non-Indo-European language of the region. However, the ruling elite, They were of Indo-Aryan origin.
That is a fascinating dichotomy, a political overlay from a completely different linguistic family. How do we know this for certain?
We know this from treaty texts recovered from the period. These treaties reveal the ruling elite's connection to Vedic Indian deities.
The text actually mentioned gods like Mitra, Indra, Surya, and Vayu.
Yes, names associated with the Vedic tradition in India. This demonstrates a deep, early link between the region's ruling structures and the migration patterns of Indo-Aryan groups who moved through or settled in this area, interacting with the existing populations.
So we have this early evidence of Indo-Aryan influence layered over a native culture, and this influence continues through later, much larger empires as well.
It absolutely does. We see it continue through the Median Federation, which was established by the Medes and reached at the greatest extent around 549 BCE.
That federation incorporated vast territories.
And later periods saw the presence of Kurdish Zelenites dynasties, highlighting sustained Kurdish influence within massive, long-lasting empires, like the Achaemenid and Seleucid dynasties.
And the source reminds us that historically, Kurds were not confined only to the core Zagros-Taurus mountain region that defines their current homeland.
This is a vital correction to the typical modern perception. The source notes the historical presence of Kurds much further west. For example, in the Amanus Mountains near Antioch, or Antakya.
And in Cilicia, the area around Kayseri or Cappadocia.
Right. Regional Kurdish families were governing there as far back as the 1st century BCE.
Which shows they were not merely an isolated mountain people.
Not at all. They were actively participating in and leading the political structures across the entire western portion of the Near East.
And that history of decentralized governance leads us directly to the bedrock of their society: social organization. To understand modern Kurdish politics, we need to clarify the terminology regarding social structure and move away from the commonly used term ashiret.
Yes, the source dedicates time to explaining why ashiret, which often translates simply as tribe, can be profoundly misleading, both academically and politically.
Why is that?
In Kurdish, ashiret often carries the connotation of a single ruling dynasty or house, similar to Kanadan in Turkish or Persian contexts.
So why is that linguistic nuance so politically important?
Because the text argues for favoring clan, or ale family to better describe the actual kinship structures dominating the Zagros-Taurus area.
So by using clan or isle, you emphasize that the fundamental building block is deep, extensive kinship.
Yes, a network of extended families bound by blood and land, rather than a single transient nomadic group or a political dynasty. It highlights the endurance of the community over the rule of one family.
And this enduring clan structure is far from a cultural relic. It remains the engine of political power, especially in Iraqi Kurdistan.
Absolutely. The source, noting observations from the early 2000s, defines Iraqi Kurdish political culture fundamentally as a clan culture.
Meaning that extended family networks and clan confederations are the indispensable basis for political legitimacy.
If you want to rule, you must command the loyalty of the major clans. It's that simple.
So the most profound effect of this reliance is that modern Kurdish political parties depend entirely on these clan supports for mobilization and internal cohesion.
Exactly. Clan ties are consistently prioritized over formal, modern democratic structures or party platforms.
And that leads to a profound tension.
A huge tension. The political elite is frequently derived directly from traditional clan leadership, like the Barzani family, maintaining ancient hierarchies of power even while promoting democratic ideals.
So this setup creates an immediate and ongoing struggle between traditional authority and the demands of modern, transparent governance.
That's the core conflict.
So if the political structure is defined by clans, the spiritual structure is defined by resilience and incredible syncretism.
It really is.
And here's where it gets really interesting. While mainstream Sunni and Shia Islam are widely practiced, the region is home to several ancient, distinct faiths that have survived millennia in the mountains. We have to begin with Yazidism.
Yazidism is truly unique, profoundly ancient, and tragically misunderstood globally. The source notes that it is distinct from mainstream Islamic sects and, in some historical analyses, has even been framed as the opposite of Shia Islam.
But its beliefs are integrated into the regional fabric.
Very much so, maintaining high status among certain Alevi and Yarasanalik groups.
Their cosmology is often confusing to outsiders. It centers on a complex form of what you might call non-dualistic dualism.
That's a good way to put it. Yazidi belief does posit a cosmos where seemingly opposing forces, good and evil, light and darkness, exist.
But it's not a battle.
Right. It's not a battle between a good deity and an evil deity. They possess equal necessary power because the universe requires continuous balance, or denj. The focus is on maintaining this cosmic equilibrium.
And that's done through the mediation of the highest angel.
The highest angel, who is the iconic figure of the peacock angel, Malak Taos.
Okay, so Malak Taos is the key intermediary between the creator and the world.
Correct. And because this balance, this denj, is so crucial, the Yazidi faith is strictly non-proselytizing. You must be born into the community to be Yazidi.
Why is that?
They believe the cosmic order is fixed, and attempting to convert others would upset the global balance.
Their metaphysics also involves fascinating concepts like reincarnation.
Yes, and a specific path to spiritual completion. The soul is believed to be continually reborn until it achieves spiritual purification.
And good and evil are necessary components for the universe to function.
Necessary. Furthermore, they believe in a universal judgment bridge, the Purdavari, which all souls must eventually cross. The source suggests that this spiritual framework, with its continuous cycles of death and rebirth, is a powerful cultural mechanism for finding spiritual renewal, regardless of the political turmoil outside.
Unfortunately, this distinct identity has often invited immense hostility.
Tragically so. The Yazidi people have endured a crushing history of persecution and massacres, or firmans,
The source notes these atrocities occurred throughout the 19th and 20th centuries.
often incited by religious leaders or rival groups using demagoguery. These attacks led to mass forced migrations and reinforced the isolation and resilience of the community.
Which we have seen recently manifest in the horrors inflicted by ISIS.
Exactly. This historical pattern of violence emphasizes why their beliefs about spiritual endurance are so central to their identity.
Another ancient, incredibly resilient faith with deep roots in the Zagros Mountains is Yarasanalik, also known as Ali Haq or Kakai.
Yarsanalik also has deep Zoroastrian ideas and pre-Islamic Iranian beliefs at its root. It shares the concept of reincarnation, which they call dunbadun.
Which means clothing after clothing.
Right, referring to the changing of bodies. But they elevate the concept of spiritual progression to a highly structured and rigorous level. The path to salvation is defined precisely. A soul must undergo 1,001 rebirths to achieve ultimate completion. It's a vast cycle of purification.
1,001 rebirths. And the source provides stunning detail on the required definition of a complete human existence.
It does. It's almost mathematical. For one cycle of rebirth to count toward that total, a full human existence must last exactly 1,000 years.
How does that break down?
According to their interpretation, it's 40 days in the womb, 40 days as a child, and 40 years of adulthood.
But what if a person dies before completing their allotted time? A child, for instance.
Their soul simply pauses and is brought back to the same body or a similar incarnation later to complete the cycle.
That is an incredibly rigid framework for spiritual evolution. Where are these beliefs documented?
The sacred texts were originally written in the Guarani language, a Pahlavi branch of Iranian languages.
And Guarani historically served as the literary language of the region.
It did, before Kermansi ascended. This language use reinforces the faith's deep roots and pre-Islamic heritage. The faith retains clear Zoroastrian elements like ritual worship directed toward the sun and the moon.
And its geographical center.
Firmly rooted in the Zagros Mountains, predating the spread of Islam. The original religious center of Yarasanalik is near Gawara, about 74 kilometers west of Kermanshah in Iran, where the highly revered tomb of Baba Yadigar is located.
Of course, the complexity of Kurdistan is defined by its being a genuinely multi-faith region for millennia.
Absolutely. Beyond these unique indigenous faiths, the source also highlights the long-standing historical presence of Christianity and Judaism.
We're talking about communities that were central to the Middle East for centuries. Assyrians, Nestorians, and Armenians, alongside Jewish communities.
Precisely. Unfortunately, the region's volatility meant that this history is often marked by tragic assimilation, persecution, or forced migrations of many of these groups, particularly during the 19th and early 20th centuries. The landscape has been repeatedly scarred by this displacement.
Another faith that faced immense hostility in the modern era was Baha'ism, particularly in Iran.
The presence of Baha'ism in Kurdistan, particularly in cities like Mehrdad, led to adherents experiencing extremely harsh persecution, especially after the 1979 Iranian Revolution.
And the source provides a powerful and tragic anecdote to illustrate this.
It does. The case of Dr. Qasimlo. Dr. Abdurrahman Qasimlo was the highly respected leader of the Kurdistan Democratic Party of Iran, the KDPI.
And he was executed by the Islamic regime.
The source notes he was tried and executed in 1979 explicitly for his Baha'i background. This wasn't merely a political execution, it was a targeted act using religious identity as the justification to eliminate a major political rival.
So his faith was used as a political weapon against him by the regime.
Absolutely. It was highly cynical. The source notes that his execution was condemned globally, and at one point the regime even refused an $80,000 ransom offered for his life, underscoring the political and ideological finality of the act.
A really powerful demonstration of how faith and political power can intersect so tragically.
It is.
And finally, we should briefly mention Alevism, which is often seen in Turkey. What are the specific characteristics of Kurdish Alevis?
Well, Kurdish Alevis and Demilia Alevism are also mentioned, and their traditions are distinct from the more assimilated Anatolian Alevis often found further west.
How are they distinct?
The source suggests that Demilia Alevism in particular preserves practices sometimes much closer to Yarsanalik, including elements like worship toward the sun and moon. This complex religious landscape is just another indicator of the long, unique cultural evolution of the Kurds.
Constantly interacting with and preserving deep traditions from different eras.
Right.
Okay, let's move into the modern crucible. The 19th century marks a pivotal shift.
Yes, the period where the last great attempts at centralized, semi-autonomous Kurdish leadership were made before the rise of modern nation-states, shattered the region into the four parts we recognize today.
And the most prominent figure here is Bedr Khan Bey.
Bedr Khan Bey, who lived from 1802 to 1848, was an enormously important political figure.
How extensive was his influence?
He established wide authority and effectively governed a large, unified part of Kurdistan. Crucially, he maintained diplomatic relations with both the Persian Qajar Empire and the Ottoman Empire, treating them as external powers.
Which demonstrated a clear, sophisticated attempt at establishing independent, recognized governance.
And the source suggests he ran a well-regarded administration. Even those outside his orbit praised him. He was credited with establishing a government of justice and fairness in his region.
But his eventual defeat in the 1840s became a defining moment of tragedy for Kurdish autonomy. How was such a powerful figure eventually defeated?
It was a monumental strategic defeat. He eventually surrendered to the forces of the Ottoman Caliph, not merely because of military pressure, but because the Ottoman authorities issued a religious decree, a fatwa prohibiting fighting against him.
So they used supreme religious and imperial authority to delegitimize his rule.
And it worked. It forced him to surrender.
That is a brutal example of using theological pressure to achieve a political objective. What was his fate?
Following his surrender, Bedr Khan Bey was imprisoned for 3 years and subsequently exiled to Crete. This use of religious authority to dismantle a powerful regional ruler fundamentally altered the power structure.
It removed the possibility of a unified Kurdish leadership just as the empires were beginning to collapse.
Precisely. And this era was also marred by devastating internal conflicts that external powers, Imperial Britain, France, Russia, were only too happy to exploit.
The political weakness that followed Bedr Khan Bey's defeat led to increased violence against Christian minorities.
Yes, notably Armenians, Assyrians, and Yazidis in the 19th and early 20th centuries. The source highlights that these internal conflicts were severely exacerbated by competing Western missions, imperial powers vying for influence, and local tensions.
So this geopolitical maneuvering fundamentally changed the structure of Kurdish leadership and dramatically weakened their overall position.
It left them vulnerable against the rising regional states that would soon define the modern Middle East.
Moving into the 20th century, we run into one of the most fraught aspects of the Kurdish national struggle, demographics. Statistics here are never merely academic. They are inherently political claims.
The source dedicates significant attention to the extreme discrepancies in Kurdish population figures, highlighting the profoundly political nature of these numbers.
For instance, official Turkish and Iranian figures are consistently reported as low.
Often intentionally low, with Turkey specifically refusing to release accurate data on ethnic minorities for decades.
And the Kurdish sources sometimes offer far higher estimates, leading to massive and rapid fluctuations in published statistics.
This creates huge instability. The source cites an example based on analyst Pelletier's observation. In 1990, the total Kurdish population in Turkey was often cited around 7 million.
But by 1996, some figures had mysteriously jumped to 10-12 million.
A percentage growth that is just demographically impossible in such a short time frame.
So how does the source explain this volatility?
It explains that this disparity demonstrates a profound lack of consensus driven by political manipulation. States deliberately underreport to deny the demographic basis for national claims.
While some advocacy groups may overreport to emphasize their importance and demand for representation.
Right. The lack of reliable, independently verified census data complicates everything from political representation to international support.
So if we look at the source's synthesis, it attempts to provide a more reasoned estimate for the early 2000s.
It does, breaking down the population into the four main states. It estimated Iran at 9 million, Iraq at 4.9 million, Turkey at 16.7 million, and Syria at 1.5 million.
Totaling around 35.6 million.
Yes, but even this reasoned estimate is immediately contrasted with global estimates from just a decade prior, which were as high as 55.6 million. This numerical ambiguity is central to the political difficulty of the Kurdish question.
And this demographic struggle is directly tied to official state policies of forced displacement, the Göz Etermeler ve Zorunlu.
Precisely. We see the mass displacement of Kurds in Turkey after 1925 as a direct response to nationalist uprisings following the historical deportations of Armenians and Assyrians earlier in the century.
This demographic engineering was designed to break up regional concentration and loyalty.
It was. But the unintended consequence of this state action, according to the source, was to actually spread the Kurdish footprint wider.
That's a powerful irony.
It is. The source points out that today in some parts of central Anatolia, specifically the former Roman area of settlement, Phrygia Megna,
Around cities like Yunak, Heymana, Cihanbeyli, Tokat, Yozgat.
Exactly. More Kurds live now in those areas due to these forced resettlements than in their former main settlement areas closer to the border. State action failed to erase the population, but fundamentally redistributed it across the national landscape.
The modern political struggle, the cycle of hope, engagement, and crushing betrayal, is perhaps best exemplified by the history of the Kurdistan Democratic Party, the KDP, in Iraq.
The KDP was founded in 1946, and its history is inseparable from the central and enduring role played by its leader, Mustafa Barzani, who dominated Kurdish politics through the mid-20th century.
The KDP became the major Kurdish political force in Iraq, fighting successive governments through the 60s and early 70s. But their defining tragedy involves repeated cycles of winning autonomy, only to be betrayed by external powers.
The most devastating example of this geopolitical vulnerability is the betrayal of 1975, revolving around the Algiers Agreement.
You have to understand the context. This was a pact primarily between Iran, under the Shah, and Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, to settle a dispute over the Shatt al-Arab waterway.
And the Kurds were the bargaining chip.
Completely.
Iran abruptly withdrew all military and logistical support for the Iraqi Kurds, who were fighting the Iraqi government at the time.
This left the Kurdish forces, who were relying heavily on traditional Peshmerga methods, meaning guerrilla tactics and fighting as those who face death, trapped on the border.
And quickly defeated by the superior arms of the Iraqi army.
That sudden withdrawal was an absolute catastrophe.
It was a crushing blow that effectively ended the first phase of modern Kurdish independence movements. The source notes that Barzani saw the collapse of his life's work.
He ended up living in exile in Tehran.
Symbolically dependent even on a salary from the Iraqi government, an irony that speaks to the depth of the betrayal before dying in exile in the United States in 1978.
The political dynamics, however, evolved. We see a generational change and internal struggles within the KDP following this betrayal.
Yes. While Masoud Barzani, Mustafa's son, continued the reliance on traditional clan ties for legitimacy and mobilization, the defeat paved the way for the rise of competing, often more radical political ideologies.
And during this time, groups like Comella, which were explicitly Marxist-Leninist, emerged to challenge the traditional clan-based leadership of the KDP.
And the external narratives around these competing groups immediately became cynical and weaponized.
Completely. The source points out that groups like Comella, despite their strict Marxist-Leninist ideology, were often labeled by their internal and external opponents as American proxies.
Which shows how quickly ideological differences were morphed into political accusations aimed at discrediting rivals, reinforcing the reliance on loyalty over political program.
Let's shift now to the cultural heart and soul of the Kurdish people. Despite the immense political pressure and fragmentation, they possess an incredibly rich literary heritage.
It's truly remarkable. It spans deep oral traditions and written epics, including the powerful tradition of the Dengbe singers, the masters of epic storytelling.
This literary output is characterized by epic poems, which the source neatly categorizes into two major types.
Those where the lovers die tragically, emphasizing sacrifice, and those that end happily, focusing on persistence.
The central epic drama, the one that embodies Kurdish national identity and ideals, is Mem-uz-Zin by İzady, written in the 17th century.
Mehrdad is often compared to Romeo and Juliet, but it is so much more than a simple love story. It focuses on the tragically star-crossed love between Mem and Zin, separated by the rivalry between the Alan and Botan clans.
And the entire narrative functions as a political allegory.
That's the key.
What specifically makes it an allegory for national consciousness?
Zani uses the failure of the lovers to unite as a metaphor for the failure of the Kurdish people to achieve national unity and sovereignty. He writes not just about star-crossed lovers, but about the fragmentation caused by clan rivalry and the failure of Kurdish leadership to resist external control.
So the separation of Mem and Zin embodies the political failures of the time.
Perfectly. Now, contrast that with the other major epic type.
Right.
The second major type focuses on resistance and sacrifice, like the Dim Dim Dastanya. This is the epic about the defense of Dim Dim Castle by the Kurdish prince Khan Pasahoybun against the powerful Safavid king.
So it's an epic of uncompromising resistance and loyalty.
Yes, culminating in a powerful, albeit bloody, symbol of national defiance.
Moving to language, Kurmanji is the most widespread dialect today. And the source notes a significant contrast in literary history between dialects.
Yes. For centuries, Southern Kurmanji, or Gorani, dominated the literary landscape. It served as the language of the courts and scholars until the 19th century.
Yet today, the source notes a distinct lack of modern Kurdish literature being produced in Gorani.
It's a striking reversal. Kurmanji, by contrast, has seen a massive flourishing with a rich and continually growing modern literary output, largely replacing Gorani as the dominant literary medium.
The music tradition is another powerful element of cultural preservation.
Kurdish music has roots stretching deep into antiquity, recognized even by Arab writers, dating back to the Abbasid Caliphate in the 8th and 9th centuries.
The source notes that Kurdish music possesses a unique structure within the broader context of Middle Eastern music. How does it distinguish itself?
It distinguishes itself primarily by being structurally independent from the dominant Arabic and Persian maqam systems, the modal melody frameworks that define much of the surrounding regional music.
So it often relies on unique rhythmic structures and melodic independence.
Yes, giving it a distinctive character that has allowed it to endure.
And contemporary artists have done much to preserve and promote that tradition globally.
Indeed. Prominent modern Kurdish artists like Shivan Perwer and Aramet Tigran are international recognized. Crucially, while many sing in Kurdish, some have achieved broader international success singing in other languages, yet they always help preserve and promote the core Kurdish musical tradition, ensuring it remains accessible and dynamic.
On the cinematic and artistic front, we see a fascinating tension regarding how Kurdish themes are portrayed and perceived internationally.
The source notes that certain prominent Kurdish artists, such as the renowned filmmaker Yilmaz Güney, focused almost exclusively on Kurdish themes of struggle, identity, and displacement.
And while his work was critically acclaimed, winning major international awards, including the Palme d'Or for Yol while he was in prison, this intense focus often led to his works being categorized or marginalized
as merely regional or political cinema, suggesting that their art was being viewed through a political lens rather than a universal one.
It's an interesting critique from the source.
It is, noting that while this approach brought specific struggles to light, it occasionally pigeonholed the art. However, the source is careful to add that this approach of exclusively focusing on Kurdish themes is not universal among Kurdish playwrights and filmmakers. Many choose to explore themes that transcend the ethnic label entirely.
Finally, let's look at the decorative arts, particularly weaving and textiles, which are so central to nomadic and semi-nomadic cultures.
Kurdish decorative motifs display a clear duality. They fall into two main groups. First, those inspired by nature, such as stylized flowers, mountains, or streams, which are often rendered in strict geometric patterns in their textiles.
And the second group?
The second group includes those motifs directly influenced by textiles, carpets, and weaving itself, utilizing complex animal, human, or organic shapes.
And these organic shapes are tied back to the social structure we discussed earlier.
Exactly. These organic and sometimes abstract shapes are often linked specifically to clan or family identity, serving as a symbolic coat of arms or identifier woven into the fabric.
Which reinforces the unbreakable connection between kinship structure and artistic tradition.
Meaning a carpet is not just an object. It's a detailed map of the clan and its history.
So, as we synthesize this massive deep dive, we return to the three foundational pillars that define the Kurdish narrative according to these comprehensive sources.
First, the deep connection between Kurdish identity and the tumultuous Zagros geography, a land that is literally rising underfoot due to tectonic collision, and which holds their water and oil wealth.
Second, the constant tension between their ancient, multimillennial roots, evidenced by sites like Shanidar and unique faiths, and the modern state-driven denial of their ethnic originality.
Which forces the culture to exist in plain sight while being institutionally erased.
And
And third, the complexity and resilience demonstrated by their unique religious landscape, particularly Yazidism and Yarsanalik, which have survived by maintaining unique spiritual structures and doctrines of reincarnation and cosmic balance.
if we connect this to the bigger picture,
We see a culture constantly redefining itself and surviving against powerful, overlapping natural and political fault lines.
so for you, the learner, the key takeaway is that understanding the Kurdish narrative requires moving far beyond simple political headlines about regional conflicts.
Definitely.
It demands appreciating the depth of their multi-millennial history, the struggles inherent in their demographics and forced displacement, and the resilience of their cultural output, which often flourishes in exile or under immense pressure.
And this leads us to the final provocative thought, drawing directly from the source material regarding the modern political elite.
Right. We noted that modern Kurdish political parties still heavily rely on traditional clan support for legitimacy and mobilization.
Often prioritizing these ties over modern democratic transparency.
This raises an important question for the next generation of Kurdish thinkers, politicians, and artists. What happens when traditional, powerful clan authority, which is based on loyalty and kinship, meets the irresistible demands of modern democracy, global education, and the push toward transparent, institutional political integration within existing state borders?
Defining their cultural and political path forward in this tension, perhaps even more than demanding independence, may be the most defining challenge of the coming century.